evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf. I am glad that you've decided to join me this evening. If you're listening live, and remember to drop a comment in the live comment section if you're listening, or hit me up on Twitter at Sean_Met28 on Twitter, or through my Instagram account with that same handle, or you can hit the show's Twitter account at NE Sports Weekly and throw a question out there or in the DMs, and we will try to answer that here for you this evening. But it is going to be a beautiful show here tonight, as it's the first one of the new year, as it is episode 35, folks. We are cooking. We are cooking along. We had the first one back in end of April, right before the draft. So we are getting close to that year mark here, but it's going to be action-packed show. And speaking of that, the draft that we started with last year, one of the products of that draft is now going to be in his first ever NFL playoff game, in being Mac Jones, as the New England Patriots were able to clinch a playoff berth after they absolutely destroyed the Jaguars 50 to 10, and it really wasn't even, I say quote unquote close because it's a 40-point win, but really the Jags got a garbage time touchdown in that last 4 or 5 minutes of the game, and it was a blowout from the jump, pretty much. The Jags were probably the closest after they got a field goal and made it a 7-3 lead, but you pretty much knew the Patriots were going to have their way with them, and they did. And Trevor Lawrence, you got to feel bad for Trevor Lawrence, man, because he's stuck down in Jacksonville in that shithole down there of a franchise. So we'll see how that goes. But anyways, the Patriots, as we mentioned, are now playoff bound right now because of a loss by the Indianapolis Colts. They now take over the top wild card spot. And now, maybe if there are a few things that fall their way, they could, one, clinch the division and hop over the Well, I don't know if they'd hop over the Bengals, but depending on how things fall, you could get the division. So that would at least guarantee you no lower than the fourth seed. Maybe scoot up to that fifth. And then because you have the tiebreaker over the Titans, you would be able to jump them if they lost. And then if Kansas City loses, then you get the number one seed. But I mean, there's a lot that has to go right there. And I mean, you just got to look at where Buffalo is playing. They're going to be playing the Jets. And we all know the Jets suck, and they're planning their vacation. They pretty much could have planned their vacation last year when they were planning vacation. It's a cyclical cycle for the Jets, and I'm here for it. It's just it's always nice when you can make fun of Jets fans. So they'll be doing their usual thing. So Buffalo, unless there's a miracle that happens, Buffalo is probably going to pull that one out. But, it'd be probably the biggest Jets thing ever if they effed up their draft pick again. They went and won a game against the Bills, of course. So, I mean, trust me, I'm rooting for it. But that's going to be on the table here as we look forward to next weekend. And, of course, we'll be scoreboard watching all week or all weekend long just to see what's going to happen here. And then we'll find out what day the Patriots will be playing. There's some rumors swirling that it would be a Monday night football game for the wild card round, because now with the quote unquote super wild card weekend, they've expanded through Saturday through Monday, make it a 3-day event, and possibly the Patriots could be that Monday night game. We'll find out if that ends up being true, but it'll be interesting to see. So that is on the table as well. And the Boston Bruins have now won 2 games in a row after they have, yes, folks, hockey is, well, at least Bruins hockey is back after they took what seemed like a year off. I know it was only a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it was, around the holidays because of COVID issues. with the team having to go to Canada and with how strict the rules are there, they didn't want to mess around with that. So the Bruins in the NHL did come to an agreement with I believe it was 4 games that they had through Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. So they had a long time off, and then they also postponed the Pittsburgh game. So their first game was that last weekend. So they're 2-0 now. And looks like David Pastrnak might be kind of coming out of his funk, although I don't know if you can really call it a funk when you've had so much time off and you can't get a rhythm going. But he really has looked pretty sharp here over these 2 games for the Bruins. But probably the biggest news since we last were all joined here together on the podcast was Tuukka Rask is now not officially, but unofficially close to signing a deal with the Bruins and coming back. And it sounds like it might be a 1-year deal with an option. As far as what that's going to look like for Tuukka, but that'll create an interesting dynamic because you have Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman who have, I mean, neither one of them has really run away with the job and said, okay, this is mine, and then you're gonna ride in the back seat. But both of them have played okay over this standpoint. Neither one of them has played horribly where you're like, okay, we can't win a game with this guy. They're all going to have their clunker every now and then, but you have 2 solid goaltenders, and we'll discuss who probably is going to either get sent down, traded, or whatever their options are. But that's going to create quite the dynamic here shortly in the next, I don't know, 3 weeks or so once it's all official that once Tuukka comes back. So it'll be a fun little storyline to follow here with Tuukka and this Boston Bruins team, who they're kind of sitting on the fence here of whether to be contenders or just to blow things up, just where this franchise stands with. They have a couple good really, really good young building blocks in Pastrnak and McAvoy and Swayman, but after that, it's kind of you still have to get some other assets there. But it'll be interesting because if you bring back Tuukka, which direction are you going to go? Because he's a veteran goaltender, and you're not just going to play for the future if you bring in Tuukka. So we'll talk about that later on the podcast, but we'll jump right back into the Patriots here, as we mentioned off the top of the show. The New England Patriots are now, after a 1-year hiatus, I know all the rest of the fan bases, I can hear the collective groaning and bitching and complaining like, oh, you guys only missed 1 year of the playoffs. We thought we were going to have like a whole decade off from you guys. Maybe just sprinkling 1 year here or there if you guys got lucky, blah, blah, blah. But no, it's nice to be back in the playoffs because it always sucks when your team isn't there in the playoffs. And I'm not going to listen. I know I have fans. I know I have friends of other teams, Browns, Eagles, other franchises that I know probably right now tell me to shut the F up because they don't have that luxury of 20 plus years of all that. But I mean, really though, it is different when your team is not in the playoffs. Obviously I love football. It's one of my favorite sports. So I'll watch. Football is one of the very few sports that I can sit down outside of baseball, and baseball and football are the 2 that I could sit down and watch any game and be very entertained. Now, of course, if the Patriots aren't in the playoffs or they get knocked out early, I'm still obviously going to watch every playoff game that's on the calendar. So, but it gives it that much more juice when it's your team that's still in the playoffs. So it's nice to see the Patriots only taking a 1-year hiatus from the playoffs, and now they are back, and they have a new quarterback. Obviously, we all have been talking about it all season long. So it's going to be Mac Jones in this cast of characters first go. Well, not everybody, but you catch the drift. It's going to be this group of guys first crack at the playoffs, and obviously they do have guys that have been there before: the Devin McCourtys, the Dante Hightowers, the Lawrence guys, the David Andrews. So those guys have all been in the playoffs. I really wouldn't put Jacoby Myers, even though he was on the team when they made it to the playoffs in 2019. But I'm talking about those guys that have been around for multiple Super Bowls. Like I said, the McCourtys, the Hightowers, the David Andrews, the Kyle Van Noys. Obviously, a lot of that's on the defensive side that have been around for these long playoff runs. So you do have the experience, but a lot of that on the offensive side, you're going to have a lot of new faces over there. Obviously, led by Mac Jones, who this is going to be his baptism by fire, because obviously he's been doing pretty well over the course of this season. It looks like Jamar Chase, with his last couple of weeks here, has pole vaulted over Mac Jones for the rookie NFL offensive rookie of the year, although I still think Mac Jones has a legitimate shot of still getting it. But I mean, honestly, I'm not, as fun as it would be to say we have the offensive rookie of the year, I really don't care. I just want somebody that you can build your franchise around and look forward to every year, that you have a shot at getting to the playoffs and hopefully going deep. So I think that's what you have in Mac. So if he doesn't get the award, I'm not going to cry over this spilt milk, to put it that way. But really, though, when it comes to the Patriots, I mean, I won't spend a ton of time on that Jags game because, I mean, obviously it was kind of, the outcome was pretty much known. You just didn't know what the final score would be. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a blowout when they absolutely steamrolled them. But still, it was nice to see that they were able to put some things behind them. They came out and played strong from the starting gun. And yes, I know they played the Jaguars, but that's not my point. They've still played some really shitty teams over the years where they haven't played their A game, even a B game. They come out playing a C plus game, and they end up losing to some of these really bad teams. Go back to 2018 when they last won the Super Bowl. They lost to Detroit and Jacksonville in back-to-back weeks. So this is it's not uncharted territory for the Patriots not to play well against some of these underling teams, those bottom feeders. But even though you knew who the opponent was, you still wanted them to go out there, correct those issues, and you wanted them to put up a strong performance. Because I know last week I said I wanted them to win anyway, anyhow, just get out there and get the win. But deep down, you really knew you wanted to see them go out there and play really well. Go out there, put all phases of the game together. Don't go out there making mistakes like Mac has last couple of weeks against Indy and against Buffalo, throwing 4 picks total and making some dumb mistakes, which we hadn't seen a lot of that from Mac, especially over that 7-game win streak. Mac played really well. He had some moments where he did carry the team in a quarter or two. I mean, still really good complementary football from him for most of that time. Made the right decisions, got the ball out quickly, what you want to see from a rookie in this system, because until he gets more weapons, I don't think you're going to really open this up. So I think in the offseason, which we'll talk about once it gets there, what they're going to have to do. But really, though, I mean, this team offensively, they did everything I wanted to see them do. Matt came out, played really efficient, was 22 of 30, could have been even better in that game. There were a couple there weren't many passes that you're like, oh boy, what is he doing? There was one to Hunter Henry in the second quarter that he really didn't shake the defender off. I mean, it ended up being an incomplete pass, but it was a little risky. But other than that, everything was solid from Mac. He had over 220 yards. He had the 3 touchdown passes. And, of course, on the ground, you had Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Both of them came out there and ran their butts off. I mean, Stevenson took over more of the game as you got into the second half. It was pretty much in hand at that standpoint. But still, it was nice to see that both of those backs were out there getting a lot of big holes. They both powered their way through, and this is going to be a hard combo to stop. Yes, is this Derrick Henry with and actually there was news today that Derrick Henry is going to be activated for this weekend, whether he's actually going to play or they're just going to activate him and have him on the roster and get him ready come playoff time next week. But or actually, if they hold on and win, then they're the number one seed. But anyways, besides the point, with unless you're Derrick Henry, who's an absolute stud, a Dalvin Cook, an Alvin Kamara, you name one of these absolutely elite running backs, Christian McCaffrey, unless you're one of those type of guys, unless you're one of the teams that has the luxury of having that type of guy, especially Derrick Henry, I mean, you're not going to have a one back that you're going to absolutely scared of that's going to just dominate the game. But the Patriots have probably the next best thing after having an elite running back, because this isn't like a quarterback where it's like, oh, you got two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. No, with skill position players, you can have multiple players, multiple wide receivers, obviously multiple running backs out there that have different skill sets. But with both of these backs, with Harris and Stevenson, they're both going to present a really hard problem going into the playoffs. So it was with both of they're both power backs, but they're different kind of power backs. I think Damian Harris runs more violently. Well, Ramondre Stevenson is more, he's got a little bit more wiggle, a little bit more speed to him, but he's still got that power where he breaks through 3 or 4 tackles and he gets out of a pile and you're like, oh, how did he get out of that? He ended up wiggling through it. So both of these guys are going to end up being key components, obviously, going into the playoffs. But it was nice to have them back and ready to go, and they were literally rolling over the Jaguars in this game. And then obviously on the defensive side of the ball, it was nice to have the defense come, and they got Trevor Lawrence to turn the ball over, which that has, I mean, obviously it's not a rare feat this year with Trevor Lawrence. He's had a not so great rookie season. I mean, can you really blame the kid? He was stuck down in Jacksonville with Urban Meyer for most of the year as his head coach. I mean, I really hope his career doesn't get ruined down there in Jacksonville, because I mean, I would like to see him actually succeed in the league. But anyways, it was he did end up turning the ball over multiple times. So the Patriots defense did really rattle his cage. They pressured him early. So it was everything that you wanted to see out of the Patriots as they moved on and absolutely clubbed the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it was one of those get right, feel good win. Well, I shouldn't say feel good in the way of you saw everything you wanted to see as far as them playing really well. So obviously, we all know the caliber of the opponent. It's not going to impress you that much, but still, it was nice to see them not kind of come out there and still flounder around and just beat the Jaguars like 20-10 or 17-3 or something, where they're just kind of out there, just kind of going through the motions because it's Jacksonville. No, they actually went out there and they corrected everything they needed to. Now they'll have a tough task to round out the regular season, as they will go down to Miami, where it's always been a house of horrors since I could remember, at least during the whole Tom Brady era, Tom Brady Belichick 20-year run. Even 2004, 2003, 2014, like all these years where they were the favorites to go to the Super Bowl, the favorites to win the Super Bowl, they even have had trouble with bad Miami teams. So this isn't anything new. So now, am I completely worried? No, I mean, because I think this Miami team, where now their balloon has been popped, so to say, now that they lost last weekend to the Tennessee Titans, so their playoff hopes have just been evaporated. They have been mathematically eliminated because of they don't have the same conference record as teams that would have the same record as them. So it's all going to be a nice mishmash there for the Miami Dolphins. But still, this is a team that doesn't have a playoff spot, but they don't have the draft picks because they ended up trading those away. So it's like they really don't have a lot to play for as far as and even like a draft position. So I think this is just where you have some guys showcase their talent. So when they hit the free agent market, they're ready to go and then they can get their deal. So I think this team will be competitive, because I don't think Brian Flores is going to let them just absolutely just slack off, even though there's nothing to play for. So I still think you'll get a good effort out of Miami. So it will be tough, but I think this is a game where the Patriots will end up pulling this one out. If I mean, really, there's going to be, unless Buffalo loses and you have teams in front of you lose, I mean, this game really isn't going to amount to much. I mean, you're going to get either the fifth or sixth seed as far as the playoffs are concerned, because it's really, and like I said, unless Buffalo just absolutely shits the bed against the Jets or the Jets pull some kind of miracle, and then you have and then you have Tennessee lose, and then you have Kansas City who's playing Denver, but this isn't the same Denver team from earlier in the year. They really have fallen off a cliff. So I mean, there's really it's a very minute chance that this actually works out where the Patriots would move up any further than probably the fourth seed. So it's going to be, it really is going to be minimal impact of what this game means for the Patriots in the playoff race, unless, like I said, unless a couple miracles happen here. Then if that's the case, like I said, you have the Bills, the Titans, and the Chiefs all lose, then hey, you win, you're the number one seed. But like I said, that I probably have a better chance of winning the lottery tonight than the Patriots actually having those teams lose and getting the number one seed. But it will be interesting to see what the Patriots kind of try to work on here, because I still don't think you can just kind of roll the ball out there and just think, all right, we'll take some guys out, we'll kind of take some plays off, we won't go as hard because we want to rest guys up for the playoffs, because I still think this is a young team that they can't take their foot off the gas pedal. You have to have these guys continue roaring and ready to go, because that's kind of what happened over that 7-game win streak. You didn't really have a feeling where, okay, these guys are lackadaisical or taking their foot off the pedal, because I mean, you don't have a team that's fully loaded with a lot of talent where they can just roll the balls out there. I mean, yes, you have Matthew Judon, who's a stud. You have JC Jackson, who's a stud. Those are true stars that you have. And of course, team, other than that, I mean, you have good players. Don't get me wrong. This team is made up of a lot of good players. I just think outside of Judon and JC Jackson, you can't really name a superstar. Maybe you have some guys that are getting to the level of becoming a star. Maybe Mac Jones will take the ascension next year. Maybe Damian Harris or Andre Stevens become a stud, I mean, a superstar next year, and maybe the Patriots bring in some star receiver. But right at this point, you can't, because of you. I mean, at least in my opinion, because you don't have a bunch of these stars where you can just be all right. Well, you had this huge track record outside of the two guys I named on defense with Judon and Jackson. Outside of that, I mean, well, I don't get me wrong. There are other guys that have track records, but I'm just saying, for the sake of the rest of the team, for the sake of Mac Jones, your running backs, the wide receivers that are new to this team, in Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, and then with your young guys on the defensive line with Christian Barmore, and then, of course, with Josh Uche, if he plays, and you have Chase Winovich, all these guys that are within their somewhere between their rookie to third year, that haven't had a ton of playoff experience or none at all, then you have to kind of get them going. You can't just let them settle and just not get a lot of reps and not have like a competitive game out there this weekend. And I think if you go out there and you play like there's still something on the line, which technically, yes, there is still something on the line, but we all know mathematically it's going to be so tough to actually advance, because just with who the Bills are playing, they're playing the Jets, and that's going to be a cakewalk for Buffalo. So, like I said, it's going to be a miracle for them. And then Denver versus the Chiefs, that one could be interesting, depending on if the Chiefs decide maybe to sit some players. But that'll be the interesting thing. Tennessee, I'll have to look here and see who Tennessee's playing. But really, though, as far as the Patriots are concerned, you no matter what the playoff scheduling, or I mean, no matter what the playoff seeding ends up looking like, I just don't think you can afford to actually go out there and just take time off as far as this is all concerned. You have to have some momentum going into the playoffs. Now, I know momentum's not going to be everything because obviously it's going to all be matchup based. But my point being is that you just can't expect to just roll the balls out there, just go, just play, and then all right, and then be ready for the playoffs. Oh, the Titans play the Texans, so that's going to be a miracle for that one to happen too. So pretty much all these teams really in front of the Patriots, unless they sit guys, unless they have some big things happen in front of them. I mean, you're not gonna see any huge upsets here. So, but my point being is that I think getting ready to go into the playoffs, outside of just having everybody go out there and play up to their best ability, I think you also want to see Mac Jones go out there and have Mac have a game like he basically did against the Jaguars, where he's completing somewhere between 70 to 80% of his passes, had 2 to 3 touchdowns, doesn't have a lot of mistakes out there, puts the team in good position, and has a couple good drives. And then obviously you just want to see them continue to pound the ball, have that offensive line just keep showing their physicality out there. And then obviously defensively, for me, what I want to just kind of see them work on is kind of how that secondary is going to be, because you do have a good test here in Jalen Waddle, who, if it wasn't for Mac Jones and Jamar Chase, might be the offensive rookie of the year. But really, though, it for me, it's just like I said on the defensive side, it's going to be how, outside of J.C. Jackson, how does the rest of the secondary look heading into the playoffs? But so that's really what I'm going to be looking for this weekend. Other than that, like I said, it's going to be tough for the Patriots to really advance further into the standings. Now, who would I want to see come playoff time? That's going to be the biggest question that not just me, but everybody else is going to be asking. Who do you want? Who do you want to see when the playoffs start? Now, I've been trying to rack my brain around this the whole time, and it's obviously the two most likely candidates, the way that things are rolling, kind of breaking at this time, is going to be the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, if we take both of those two teams, for me, the one that I would want to see would be Buffalo, in my opinion, just because teams that have good running backs end up giving the Patriots the fits. Because let's just see, you look at Indianapolis, who with Jonathan Taylor absolutely ripped them a new one at the end of the game. They held them in okay terms. I mean, he still probably had close to 100 yards or just over 100 yards before he ripped off that 57-yarder. But he's one of those guys where he gives the Patriots fits. If you're the Bengals, I know not everybody thinks of Joe Mixon as like this elite running back, but to me, Joe Mixon he's a very good running back. He's one of those guys that everybody kind of leaves out of the conversation of those top tier running backs, obviously, unless you're kind of in that fantasy zone or you're a Bengals fan or you're in the AFC North. But I mean, Joe Mixon is a really good running back. He's not one that anybody you're going to sneeze at. He is worlds better than Devin Singletary or Zach Moss with the Buffalo Bills. And for me, why I want Buffalo, besides them having bad running backs, is that obviously we all know that Josh Allen is probably their best running back on that team. And obviously he does create a lot of problems with his legs. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying that. But the point for me is the reason that I want Buffalo is that they are a team that is built around basically one player, and that is Josh Allen. And I know the obvious thing is going to be, oh, no shit. Everybody builds around their franchise quarterback. But when I say that it's built around him, I don't mean it's just like, oh, the Patriots built around Tom Brady and then they just neglected it. Well, maybe you could say that over the last couple of years when he was there. But the point being is that, to me, they rely on Josh Allen to do way too much way too much. There's so much on Josh Allen's plate. It's like, all right, you're going to be one of our best running backs on this team. All right, then we're going to have you throw for 300, 400 yards in a game, rush for 50 to 70 some odd yards, or maybe over 100, and be just absolutely do everything, which, I mean, for on the short term, I mean, that can work. But to me, I just think when you have somebody, a quarterback of that skill set, when he's asked to do so much and basically do everything, it's basically him and Stephon Diggs. That's all that offense is. It's Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Yes, I know they have Cole Beasley, who at times shows up, but I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is a shell of himself. Gabriel Davis has shown up at times to make some plays, but still, it all revolves around Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. If that team actually had running backs to complement them, they actually had good ones, not Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, who they don't scare me. Yeah, they can make some plays every now and then. I'm not saying they're scrubs, but they're not great either. So to me, when it comes to the Patriots, I really would rather have them play Buffalo, because when you're putting that on Josh Allen, not that obviously he's turned into an MVP candidate over the last 2 years, but when you have so much on your plate, I just think you're bound to make mistakes. You're bound to throw an interception at one point because you're like, okay, it's all pretty much on me. It's me and Stephon. And because, I mean, you can pretty much wrap up the rest of those Bills wide receivers. I mean, to me, it's just you're asking him to do way too much. And at some point, in a critical point where he's probably fatigued, where he's carried the team on his back, he's going to throw into like double coverage at some point, trying to force the ball into Stephon, where that's where you're going to have JC Jackson. And if you have some safety help with either Adrian Phillips or Kyle Duggar or Devin McCourty out there, then that's where, or maybe even a slot corner that's kind of helping. I think that's where it's going to end up. He's going to make a mistake in a key point where like I said, where he's kind of fatigued from carrying this team, because even though the Bills have turned it around here the last couple weeks, still this season, it's been up and down for this Buffalo team. To me, it's not the same Buffalo Bills that we saw last year that ended up going to the AFC Championship game, not because of the lack of Josh Allen. He's been pretty much, to me, the same. It's just, I just don't see the same offensive kind of firepower that they had last year. To me, you had more Cole Beasley showed up more than he has this year. Then you had, to me, at least it seemed like you had some better weapons going around Josh Allen, even though, I mean, the cast kind of stayed the same for whatever reason. Beasley just hasn't been the same this year. But anyways, to me, it's just, I just think there's more chance of Josh Allen trying to do way too much, that he kind of makes some mistake. And the Patriots, as we all know, are very opportunistic defense. They are I believe they're the top scoring defense in the league. And they right behind the Colts, they have the second most turnovers. So, I mean, this team can definitely score with their defense and make you pay. And you give Mac Jones room. I mean, if you give Mac Jones short field along with these running backs, they will make you pay. Because I feel like I just feel like in the playoffs they'll be locked in, and they'll be ready to go. They'll pound you, and especially if you're playing Buffalo, they'll pound it right down their throats. So I would rather see Buffalo in this situation, because if you look over at Cincinnati, I know a lot of people have tried to make the case that, and which is valid, that they have a coach in Zach Taylor, who has never been to the playoffs. He's a rookie playoff coach. I think this is his second or third year there in Cincinnati. But to me, yes, that would definitely be a factor, that you could have panic from your head coach who has never been there, and you have Bill Belichick, who's the greatest head coach of all time, probably in any sport at this point, or at least he's on the Mount Rushmore along with the other sports. But really, to me, the reason I wouldn't want to face Cincinnati is that I just think Joe Burrow has a lot of swagger. He's got a lot of that it factor to him outside of being an actually really good player who's in the conversation, who's probably entered the MVP conversation late over the last couple of weeks. But I mean, Joe Burrow looks like he's the real deal now that he's come back from his knee injury. I mean, and Jamar Chase, oh my God, Jamar Chase is an absolute stud. I mean, I wasn't sure if Cincinnati was going to go with Penei Sewell, who ended up going to Detroit because they obviously needed help on that offensive line for Joe Burrow. But really, though, I just like everybody else, I figured Jamar Chase would be a really good rookie. I've you didn't know how well it was going to translate because he took a year off. But I mean, obviously, he is blowing by a lot of his rookie records. He already after last week, he surpassed his former college teammate in Justin Jefferson, who's an absolute stud superstar in his own right out in Minnesota. But he absolutely set the world on fire here this year as a rookie, and he definitely has consideration for being an all-pro as a rookie. That's how good he's been. So you have Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, that LSU connection, both teammates obviously back in that 2019 LSU championship. But besides Joe Burrow, you have T. Higgins, who himself is 1,000-yard receiver. You have Tyler Boyd at one point in his career, because this Tyler Boyd has been around for 4 or 5 years with the Bengals. He's at 1,000 yards. So you have really good weapons there. Don't after Jamar Chase, it's not like it's just the Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow show like it is up in Buffalo, where it's Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. The Cincinnati Bengals have a absolute bucket full of riches. They have it's overflowing. they have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. I would take any one of those receivers on the Patriots in a heartbeat. Obviously, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, obviously, and Tyler Boyd, who a lot of people are forgotten, but he's still really good. And then, of course, you look at Joe Mixon, who, like I mentioned earlier, is somebody that a lot of people don't tend to put in that top tier of running backs. They just they for whatever reason they kind of forget about him. Maybe because he is in Cincinnati. He's part of the Bungles. I mean, they're not really the Bungles anymore. They've really kind of gotten past that. But what my whole point in this whole conversation about Joe Mixon is that he is an underrated running back. He has 1,200 yards, 1,205 to be exact, 13 rushing touchdowns, 42 receptions, 314 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So we're talking 1,500 yards from scrimmage and 16 total touchdowns. So you're talking about a guy that can catch the ball in the backfield when they need him to. A guy that can also he's a stud running back. He's the bell cow of that offense. So you can't just go and leave the box unloaded and just kind of play more dime and more nickel coverage with his team. You're going to have to respect the run because he can make you pay. So there's a lot of offensive weapons. And like I said, Joe Burrow is back from the injury. Joe Burrow looks amazing. He was a guy that you didn't know of because he transferred from Ohio State, went to LSU. He had the amazing year, set all these records at LSU. But you're like, is this a one-year flash at an SEC school? It didn't end up being that. Well, at least so far early on in his career, the Bengals found a true franchise quarterback. And I mean, as much as I love what Mac has done here, and I think he's your future, I mean, not that I think he is the future, and I'm happy to have him. And obviously, this is a hypothetical because I mean, obviously, I'm happy with what they have, and I mean, unless you put one of these top tier guys on my doorstep as a trade, then I'm not going to really make the trade. But I mean, obviously, you have to put Joe Burrow along with the Patrick Mahomes, the Justin Herberts, the who else am I forgetting here? Burrows, Herberts, the Mahomes. I'm just trying to think of these younger guys that have signed these contracts. But you catch my drift. Yeah, I mean, obviously with Joe Burrow, I would trade Mac Jones any day of the week. That's how good I think that Joe Burrow is and is going to be here for the foreseeable future. But obviously that's not going to happen. But and like I said, I'm happy with Mac Jones and I really love what he's done and he is your future. But as far as Joe Burrow though, you he's proven that he's in that probably lower tier of the MVPs, but he's in the conversation. So this is a whole team. Defensively, I'm not as worried because this isn't. They don't have some of the same pieces. They traded away Carlos Dunlap last year. They still have Geno Atkins, but I still respect them, but as far as defensively, I think you could score points on them. It's just going to be Cincinnati is so high powered offensively that it's going to be difficult to try to go point for point with them, especially when you don't have a lot of high powered weapons yourself. You're based more on your running game at this point in time. Uh, But not, I still think that Patriots would be able to win that game, but I think that's the more to me that's the one that scares me more because of Cincinnati having more weapons. Joe Burrow, we all know he he doesn't lack for confidence. He's one of those type of guys that I think would absolutely, if you doubt him, you give him any opportunity, he's going to take advantage of it and run with it. So this is a guy I would rather see Buffalo where as good as Josh Allen is, as higher up on the MVP chain that he is right now over Burrow, I just think that Buffalo presents way too many. I mean Cincinnati just to me has way too many weapons for this secondary, with which I think at this point you probably should have kept Stephon Gilmore because if you had Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson, who I mean I got to give credit to J.C. Jackson. I coming into this season thought he was a top tier number two. I didn't think he was a true number one, but he's proven me wrong this year. He has turned himself into a number one corner and not just a low tier. He's a top tier shutdown number one corner in this league. I've come around to it, and he really is. So if you had J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore, I would feel so much better having to go up against the teams with the likes of Cincinnati, or you go into Buffalo, you go into these other places where you have a lot of these young receivers. But to me, like I said, because Cincinnati has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins specifically along, and then Tyler Boyd, it really scares me as far as what they have the potential to do. Especially Jamar Chase absolutely lit up a Chiefs team that, as much crap as I probably gave them early on in the year with the Chiefs, their defense is rounded into form here, going down the stretch. And Jamar Chase put up it was 11 receptions for 266 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, come on. Come on. That's unreal. That is unbelievable. I mean, no words for that. So, like I said, as much as a problem as Buffalo is going to be, and I just think that also what you have to kind of factor into it is that if you have to go back up to Buffalo and the weather's horrible, if you have bad weather, wind, snow, rain, all the wintry mix, if you have that going up there, we know Buffalo does not have a running game outside of Josh Allen. And you don't want your quarterback to be doing all of the heavy lifting. You at least need some compliments. And we saw what happened last time during the weather. And I think the Patriots, because it's Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, would be able to hold them down. And don't get me wrong, I'm not ignoring what happened 2 weeks ago when the Bills came to Foxborough, and as not that the score was really close, but the score for a time they were only down by 5 points until Buffalo ended up winning by 12. because Buffalo all day long was able to move the ball down the field. The Patriots defense was 6 for 10 on third down, so they just weren't great all game long. They let up some key third downs. But I think I think at this point, I think the Patriots having to see them a third time, seeing what they were able to pull out when it was good weather, when they had an opportunity to really flex out and play the way Buffalo wanted to. I think if you kind of get into Buffalo in some of those really bad conditions, I think that's where you'll have the ability to go out and you'll have the ability to potentially stop that, potentially really force this team into a one-dimensional team. And if it's bad weather, we all know that. But right now, Buffalo is a team that's really more built to be an indoor team. They should really swap spots with Indy. That's really what the teams are playing like. Reversed. Indy's playing like an outdoor team, and Buffalo's playing like an indoor team. So I just think there's more opportunities between asking Josh Allen to do too much. And if you have to go back up to Buffalo and the weather's bad, that actually favors you as the Patriots because you have those two stud running backs. And we saw what happened. Now, I think if it's obviously not as windy, but it's kind of crappy weather, it's snowing, raining, I think Mac will be able to pass the ball this time around. And at least maybe not 30 times, but if you can ask him to pass it 15, 20 times and still run the ball 30, excuse me, 30 plus times, then I think that would be a good recipe for a victory. Now, obviously, I'm not underestimating the Bills. I'm not saying that they can't win. They're still one of the teams that I think has a legitimate shot of going to the Super Bowl out of the AFC. So I'm not doubting that this is a fraud team. I just think Buffalo has its warts. And that's the thing with a lot of the AFC this year. I don't care. Even Kansas City, who have looked better and better this time around the last month or so with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce looking like their old selves again, and Patrick Mahomes, who looked lost early on in the season, was making some stupid mistakes. Now he looks like he's back to being MVP, Patrick Mahomes. But still, they have their warts. They're not perfect. None of the teams in the AFC to me are perfect. So that's going to be the one thing that you're looking at going into the playoffs is that, yes, where you can doubt if the Patriots have enough offensive firepower and is the defense for real. But I mean, you can ask that about a lot of people. Like I said, with Cincinnati, is their defense for real? Is Joe Burrow and a rookie and a coach? It's a Burrow and a coach combo that haven't been to the playoffs. Are they going to make their mistakes? What are they going to do? Are they going to have deer in the headlights when it gets to the playoffs? Does Buffalo if of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, if somebody is able to shut down Stephon Diggs, are they going to have enough weapons? And if they need to run the ball, are they going to be able to run the ball? So there's questions there. And obviously you can go up and down. Tennessee, is Derrick Henry going to be, even if he comes back, is 60% of Derrick Henry going to be enough? Or if he re-injures that foot, is it going to be enough with their backup running backs and then having to rely on their passing game, which obviously they have some good stud receivers, but still, is Ryan Tannehill going to be enough to carry the team? Because we all seen him be a good passenger along with Derrick Henry, but still, there's questions with all of these teams. And we haven't even touched the NFC. We'll break the NFC side of the bracket down once we get into next week when we do a look into the playoffs. We'll do a playoff special going into the wild card weekend next Wednesday. But still, this is a team that really, I mean, this is on the AFC side, this is a league that really is going to be up in the air. So I could honestly see, well, depending on how the last couple wild card spots shake out. But I mean, if it's a Patriot, even the wild card teams with the Patriots, the Patriots, the Colts, and if it's the Chargers, any of those teams, I could see coming out of the wild card spot and making one of those unforeseen runs to the playoffs or making a run to the Super Bowl out of the wild card. I mean, if it's Vegas that wins or or Pittsburgh that somehow one of those teams sneak in, no, they don't have a shot. But for the most part, any of these teams, if you give me them and say, oh yeah, the Bills, the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Titans, Patriots, Colts, Chargers, I could make a case for any of those teams and be like, yeah, they have the pros, they have the cons, and they're because nobody's the 2007 Patriots, that undefeated team heading into the playoffs, or your 2004 Patriots or the 2004 Colts, any of these like super teams along the way. And we all know we know what they look like because we've seen them plenty of times with the Patriots where, yeah, this is a team that's going to roll through the AFC. Now, who's going to be the opponent out of the NFC? But this year, it's just there's a lot of up in the air type of, okay, maybe at the beginning, like, there's a handful of teams, but now there's kind of developed into that pool of 7, 8, 9 teams that you could say any of these could make to the Super Bowl. Now, as you mentioned early on in the show, there's been some news actually with the Boston Bruins, as Tuukka Rask is unofficially looking like he's going to sign a contract here shortly with the Boston Bruins. So it looks like that he'll be back on most likely what would be a short-term deal. What I've heard, maybe a year, 2 years, with maybe that second year is an option year for Tuukka. But what's going to be interesting is that you already have, like I mentioned off the top of the show, you have two goaltenders that have been playing okay. Neither one of them has been red or white hot where they've run away with this job and you're like, okay, this is theirs to lose. This is their job to lose. No, it hasn't been like that, but neither one of them either has been horrible. You're like, all right, get this guy out of town or send him back down to Providence type of situation or trade him out of here. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when Tuukka finally does come back. Because if he signs now, he'll probably go on a rehab assignment down in Providence, and we'll see how that works for Tuukka. But as well as once he finally gets back and once he's healthy and ready to go, Tuukka is going to be your starting goaltender. He's not going to come back and ride the bench. At least I don't see that happening. So who's going to be the odd man out? My gut would tell me it's going to be Swayman because he's the rookie. He's the guy that still has options where you can send him down to Providence. And because he has only played before we got to this year, he played most of this. Yeah, he played in college up at UMaine, and then he came down to Providence and didn't have a lot of time down there, and then came up with Boston at the end of last year. So this has been a meteoric rise for Swayman, who we all kind of watched, especially me. I'm up here in the state of Maine, so I get to. I don't watch a ton of UMaine hockey, but of course, I get the close up access to him as far as able to see his progress. They are always showing him on like the local news and everything. So you get to keep your tabs on Swayman before he even got up to Providence and up with Boston. And you knew he was Boston Bruins property even when he was up there. So the point being is that he's the guy that's quote unquote expendable because he still has options and he's the young guy. And then what you also have to think about is right now they paid Linus Ullmark, what was it, 4 or 5, gave him a 4 or 5 year deal, and it was $15 or $25 million over the total of the contract. So he's getting paid pretty decent money over that time span. So it would be hard you can't just be like, oh, cut him and release him. And that's going to be a pretty decent sized contract if you're going to try to trade him or move him away as far as Allmark. So I think just by default, I think Swayman's going to be the odd man out, which sucks because I think Swayman he's going to be your goaltender of the future. I think once he gets more time under his belt, once he gets a full NHL season, you see what he's got. I think he's got the potential to be your franchise goaltender. But obviously, if you're bringing Tuukka back, the other thing you have to remember is that this team is not, they're not going to be in sell mode then if you bring Tuukka back. At least that's my opinion, because how can you bring a veteran player the likes of Tuukka, who he's not going to come back to a team that's not in contention, that doesn't have thoughts of trying to make it deep into the playoffs. Now, obviously, we can argue the Bruins have the firepower to do so, but just bringing Tuukka back, that's got to tell you something, that they're not planning. They probably are not planning on trading away a Bergeron or a Marchand, some of these veteran pieces, to try to build for the future. I think this franchise is going to try to ride out that last year to 2 years of what they have with Bergeron and the rest of this core that are kind of at the very end of their prime. Especially, like I said, especially Bergeron. But I think this is where this signals when you decide to bring Tuukka back, you're going for it. Now, I was hopeful that maybe if they didn't bring Tuukka back, that they might try to trade away some of these pieces and get some future prospects, some future players to bolster some depth and get back some other guys that you can build around along with David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy. That's really what I was kind of hoping for, because I just did not. I I just don't see them being able to go further into the playoffs. I mean, last year, after you signed Taylor Hall, I kind of got that jolt of energy, like, oh yeah, this is a team that with this top line and Hall and Krejci, that at the second line that you can make a deep playoff run. But I obviously they lost in the second round of the Islanders, and it was just so frustrating. And then it just hasn't been the same, and it looks like they were kind of in no man's land. But I mean, I guess in the short term, it does have to give you maybe short term a little bit of energy and be like, okay, you're bringing in Tuukka, you're not gonna be trading off players. You're gonna be try at least make one more run at it. But again, you have you have older talent as far as with Marchand and Bergeron. So it's, to me, it was what could you get for some pieces that you're not going to use, or if it's a Bergeron or a Marchand, which you don't I trust me, I don't want to see him go, but if you could get something for him, in my opinion, I would trade them just so. Well, if you could get a unbelievable package, let me say it that way. If you could get an unbelievable package or something that's going to blow your socks off, then I would trade them to get something for them, because to me, I'm just worried about the future of this team, because I just don't see that unbelievable next generational talent. Now they did get his name is escaping me, but he's the Finnish player, the player that they ended up getting last year in the draft. That was kind of, he has a lot of talent. Was like a top tier prospect, and then some other things happened, maybe because he went with his signing. So his name is escaping me, but he's one of their he is one of the bright spots that people are saying that maybe you could pair him with David Pastrnak and he could have that dynamic scoring duo there, or maybe put him on the second line. So I name is escaping me, but basically the point here is that outside of maybe a handful of players in their organization in the minor leagues, your building blocks are, you don't have as many of them as you'd like to down in the minors. So I think you just need to kind of refresh this. So that's where I was kind of hopeful that maybe if maybe you didn't bring back Tuukka, and you kind of realize that you have to hit that reset button, the rebuild button here, and build around Pastrnak and McAvoy. But again, I just think bringing back Tuukka signals a different story, which, I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit there and argue. Obviously I love playoff hockey, so I'm not going to complain that that's going to be happening. But to me, it's just a little bittersweet, because I just don't want to see this kind of go down the road of hanging on to guys too long and then not getting something for them when it's too late. But it will be interesting to see nonetheless. And of course, a quick note here that we didn't mention off the top of the show, but Major League Baseball has not opened up any further negotiations with the Players Association. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops as we get into as we're already in the off season, but as we get further into January, February, April, March, April area to see how long this kind of gets pushed into. Hopefully, it's not a full lost season here. Hopefully, they can get back to it, but it's just not promising when they just haven't. There's no end in sight as far as them looking into negotiating labor and reopening this. So it's going to be so disappointing, and shame on Rob Manfred, shame on a lot of people in the baseball front office and players association, just because it's like I want this game back. I want to be able, when April rolls around, when May's here, just to be able to watch baseball. I love it so much, and it's just going to suck if you just can't agree on something. So it's just disappointing just to hear over these last couple of days that Major League Baseball has not opened up any further channel, or the Players Association, neither side has opened up any further channels for the player for any further negotiations. So that was disappointing to hear. But we will be back next week with a breakdown of the Patriots Dolphins game as we check in on the last regular season game, and we'll have your NFL playoff special as we get ready for NFL postseason. We'll break down the AFC and NFC side of the pool. And of course, any news with the Boston Bruins or Celtics, we will get you that as well. And if there's any chance in hell that baseball actually gets any negotiations going, we'll update you on that. And we'll probably do a segment on the Brady Man in the Arena next week as well, because there's been some interesting things that have come out of this documentary series. Now there's 10 parts. Next week is part 9. So this obviously is going to be the last one with the Patriots when they won Super Bowl 43 against the Rams in Los Angeles. But there have been some interesting things, so we will talk about that next week as well and break down Man in the Arena and have some fun with that as well, along with our playoff breakdown. As we mentioned, always, if you like the show, click the like and subscribe button on YouTube, hit the bell for any notifications. And for the podcast version of this show, you can go on to Spotify, just search New England Sports Weekly, or go on to SoundCloud, also search for New England Sports Weekly as well, and you'll be able to pull up the show. And as well, hit the like and subscribe there. And then if you have any questions, always remember the live stream is every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Hopefully we can see you here. Or if you want to send in any questions over Twitter or Instagram, you can hit me up on the personal at Sean Met. So, and as you can see right here on the screen, it's SEAN_MET28. So Sean_Met. That's my personal Twitter and Instagram. So hit me up there. Or you can hit up the show's Twitter account at NE Sports Weekly, on Twitter. And send me any questions. Love the feedback. Love to hear from you. But I hope to hear from you next week. And as always, I hope you have a good rest of your day and a happy new year to you all. See you next week.